Welcome to the Dr. Dean Show again. We are joined once again with our co-host, Dr. Elizabeth Zach, who is a licensed psychologist, and she is with our clinic, the Beckloff Behavioral Health Center.
Dr. Dean Beckloff has been working as a counselor with students, families, kids, and teens for over 40 years. As the founder of the Beckloff Behavioral Health Center, Dr. Dean focuses on children and families that need a little extra help via counseling. Each week with Dr. Elizabeth Zach, we discuss all things family related to help people create the positive family they want to build. Welcome to the Dr. Dean Show.
Welcome again. We are here for our show, Dr. Dean Show. And today's topic is the magic of play, because we're going to be talking about counseling with kids and working with children. And I think you'll find it to be enriching and helpful. We're joined today by Tricia McCann, who is our Director of Children's Counseling at our center, which is, again, the Beckloff Behavioral Health Center, which you can find more information at www.drbekloff.com, DRBECKLOFF.com. But Tricia is incredible and powerful in her work with kids. She takes care of everything that has to do with the counseling of kids. And she's always coming into the room with more stuff, which is great. So she's keeping us going in a beautiful way. We have some wonderful play therapy rooms. And so we're going to be looking at play. We're going to be looking at counseling with kids and why play. And I will say too, at our center, we work front and center with parents. That parents are an integral part of working with their kids and helping them to grow and develop. And Tricia will be kind of helping us to understand the role of parents. But we believe in parents and empowering parents, as well as empowering the child too, in play therapy. Play has been used for probably over 100 years now in working with kids, starting with Sigmund Freud, and then his daughter Anna Freud did a lot of work in play therapy, and it continued on with several stellar people through the years. And play is almost magical. It's like magic. When you get in there with a kid and you see what they're doing, it's like magic, but really it's not that much off of what we do. We say children that play is their language and the toys are their words. And so that's not that mysterious, because that's exactly what is happening with language. They are symbols that are being manipulated, but it's just different, but it's magical when you're looking at it. So we're going to be looking at the magic of working with kids and working in play therapy. As I said, Tricia is excellent. And so my first question, Tricia, is, and I hope it's okay to call you Tricia here.
Of course, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the introduction.
Why play therapy? Anything else you would add to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as you said, Sigmund Freud was kind of the first one to bring play therapy into the psychotherapy field. Probably the early 1900s was when it kind of started. Since then, as you can imagine, it's like evolved pretty greatly. And now it's kind of referred to like a large number of treatment models that use play as the foundation, right? They use it as the way to connect the theories to. You know, as adults, we face so many different obstacles in life, right? Day to day, life can feel so heavy, and that includes our kids too. You know, our kids have heavy stuff too. And
yes,
the power, yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do.
And
they don't have, you know, all the resources as adults that we have. However, it's still hard for them too, because, I mean, obviously they've got the support of their families.
Yes.
At least some kids do.
Yes.
And still, it is hard. And how do we help them?
Yeah. Well, through play therapy, you know, we can target so many different types of changes that we might want to see in a child's life. You know, behavior modification, it increases their confidence, their self-esteem, their ability to problem solve and to communicate their needs and their wants and their emotions. And it helps them ultimately better understand their world and their interpersonal relationships and learn so much. They get such a rich vocabulary of language within the sessions.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is interesting about play therapy is that research has shown that it helps develop language skills.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about,
Right.
but it helps
Yeah.
development. And so
We've been talking about the development of language skills and how important that is
Yeah.
for emotional regulation.
right.
Huge,
And so
huge.
play is really foundational in terms of development. I've been up with my youngest grandkid, who is 6 months old, and it's just so interesting to watch her, and she's reaching out and grabbing toys and trying to understand and manipulate those toys. And
Yeah. The quote that you said, it was by Gary Landreth, and he says that toys are a child's words and play is their language, right? When we think about language, we think expression, right? It's a way to kind of put it's a tangible way of thinking about our thoughts, right? And there's different ways of communicating and using language: speech, writing. It could be a look that you give your kiddo when they're being, or your significant other. It could be from a prayer. So communicating and using language helps us connect with ourselves, our world, and with everything around us. And then to get a little sciencey and brainy, it helps us kind of go to the prefrontal cortex, right? And develop that skill. And the prefrontal cortex is important for, improving impulse control and problem solving and just all kinds of things that we need to develop resilient adults.
Yeah, absolutely.
So play is the foundation of all that.
Well,
It's
I
huge.
remember, we've been talking a lot about that on this show, about moving up to that prefrontal cortex. And if you're having trouble with your child regulating emotions, their behavior, that is the part of the brain that we want to be training. And it comes through calmness and calmly bringing them up where they can rationally think and process. I'll tell you one story. Years ago, I had this family come in, and they came in for this one problem, but I noticed very early on, and this gets back to the mystery of play, I noticed very early on, the little girl began putting a girl on a bed in our sandbox, because we always have sandboxes, and then she surrounded them with creatures that were scary. And after doing that for a couple of weeks, or maybe 3 weeks, she finally brought in some nice animals that chased them all away. Right after that, her parents came in, and I didn't know that she was having problems going to bed. They came in and said, "We don't know what to make of this. This girl, we've always had to lay down with her and stay with her and pat her back and stay with her till she fell asleep because she was so scared. And we've just been tucking her in, and she's been turning over and going to sleep."
It's amazing.
So
Yeah.
I didn't
great.
even know that was a problem.
Yeah.
And here we are,
Yeah.
the magic of play.
I mean,
Magic
if
of
you
play.
think about how many toys there are in the world and how many types of play, the combinations, play therapy is limitless in my eyes when it comes to the combination. I mean, kids who don't have any toys will find dirt and sticks and they'll play. It's universal. It's here. It's global, right? Play is everywhere for kiddos.
I grew up in Africa many years ago, 1960,
Yeah.
in the villages, and children played.
Yes.
They didn't have toys.
They didn't have toys, I'm sure. And there was
But they played.
found
with
things to
sticks
play
and
with. Yeah.
Things that would roll. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Well,
pretty cool.
I love this topic, I think, and I love the idea that play is magical, and it can be so transformative. And I'm going to admit that when I first, began in graduate school, play therapy to me was talk therapy with toys, was, using toys is sort of a way to help a kid feel comfortable, to connect, to reduce maybe some of the nerves,
Which is true.
which is true.
Yeah, very
I mean,
true.
a lot of our kids come anxious. When they walk into the playroom, suddenly
Yes.
that anxiety resides. So
Yes.
yeah, there is a point to
There
that.
is a piece. I will say that, even I have an interesting story about the power of play therapy. So I'm going to go way back. When I was about 5 or 6 and my brother was 6 or 7. So we're talking, dating myself.
A couple of years ago.
45 years ago. Yes, just a few years ago, when counseling therapy was not what it is today. My older brother struggled with separation anxiety, severe separation anxiety, school refusal. I mean, it was pretty traumatic for my parents, right? For my brother, for me as a younger sister,
Mhm.
and they tried everything. And the principal was helpful, and everybody tried to help my sweet brother. And it wasn't until, shout out to Sally Woolrich in Houston, the principal of my elementary school, who suggested play therapy. I thought it was the coolest thing. He got to go in and play and hang out, and he always came out with a root beer. It was before bottled water, right? So he always came out with a root beer, and I thought, this is the coolest thing.
And that wasn't fair to you.
It was not fair to me. He got to go in and have this special time
And get a root beer.
and get a root beer, and he shared about what they did. And to see the change in my older brother, this is when I decided I wanted to be a child therapist.
Oh, that's
Nice.
fantastic.
Because of the work that this therapist did,
Yeah.
and the magic that to me, I didn't know what they were doing, but it was so powerful.
It is so powerful.
So powerful.
And it transformed. It was transformative.
Completely transformative. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess my question is, for people who might think that it really is just talk therapy with toys, a lot of us in the center use child-centered play therapy. So I guess if you could share a little bit about what that looks like.
Absolutely. So child-centered play therapy is based on the principles of Carl Rogers' person-centered therapy. It's the idea that the therapist believes that the client has this innate ability to be constructively self-correcting and self-healing if given the environment that kind of is, it's full of unconditional positive regard, empathetic understanding, and congruence with the therapist. So that's kind of a bigger overview of child-centered play therapy. Some great
fantastic.
Principles behind it. I mean, I didn't know I wanted to be a play therapist until I accidentally took a play therapy class. It was like, oh, I have to fill in the spot. And my supervisor was like, just do play therapy. I think you'll like it. And the very first class I had, I remember leaving that class and just bawling. And I'm like, this is it. This is for me.
You found your passion.
Yeah, this is it. It was so moving.
That was me too.
Yeah.
When I took my first play therapy course, I had been working with kids. I had been a school teacher for elementary age and then junior high, and then wanted to get my master's in counseling. And so then I needed to take a course, play therapy I took. I was like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah.
This is where I want to land.
I feel like that happens to all the play therapists, that it's like a moment in time that you can feel it. It's a connection.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And
I love it.
I have regrets. So I was at North Texas with, the home of play therapy.
I was too.
Right?
Yes.
Where Gary Landreth, his home. And I look back and think, how did I not take a class from Gary Landreth when I was there?
Oh my gosh, I know.
And I regret that so much. I had other electives and things to fill. But I think, I think you all are very, very, I'm sure, feel very lucky that you were able to train under.
Oh, my word,
I'm sure.
yes,
Yeah.
it was.
That's so cool.
So let me ask you
Yeah.
really a couple of questions. One of them is, what kind of age range are we talking about? Because, do you do babies? Now, my 6-month-old was playing. She was playing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But what's the age range? And then what does a session look like?
Yeah.
When you're with a kid in session, what does that look like?
Yeah. So the age range is typically from 3 to about 11 or 12-ish for traditional play therapy. And sessions look very non-directive. The child is leading and the therapist is following, and we'll get into more details about kind of what the therapist is there for and what they're doing. But each session is typically about 30 to 50 minutes. The younger the kiddo, the more if it's a 3-year-old, I do about 30 minutes. And then the older they get, we get to that 50-minute mark. So yeah.
And is there anything else about the session itself that you would add to that? I know you're going to get into strategies.
Sure.
It's just you with the kid.
So the therapist and the child
And toys.
And toys. And
Yeah.
sand. And, the kind of that limitless thing that I talked about when a child walks into a playroom. It's, it's magical, like you said. And so, the possibilities are endless, and sometimes they'll engage you in your play, and sometimes you're never engaged in the play, but you're providing meaning and language and thoughts and feelings and
Exactly.
all that fun stuff. Yeah.
So not just going in and saying, we're going to play this.
Yeah. Hey, play this. I'm just going to sit
And
over
I'm
here.
going to sit and watch you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yes.
maybe you could share a little bit about, what are some of the strategies
absolutely.
that you would use?
So one of the biggest ones is tracking. And a good way for me to describe that is if you're missing your favorite football game and you're on the road and you got a 5-hour drive, you're going to turn on the radio and listen to that football game, right? And it's going to feel like you're there. So that's what
Like
the
an
therapist,
announcer,
yes, a person who kind of keeps the flow, is continuously talking. You're going to take that toy and you're going to put it there, and that giraffe is going to try to eat that line. Like you're really
And
tracking.
what is the purpose of that?
Yes, the purpose is to help the child understand that you are there, you are present, you are with them, and they don't have to look back. Oftentimes you'll see a kiddo and they're like looking to see if you're looking,
If you're paying
and
attention,
they
if you're with them.
want that attention. So if you're tracking them, that's not something they have to worry about, right? It eliminates that. Hey, is this adult watching me? Are they paying attention? I need that attention, right? And so tracking is huge. And I guess with like limit setting and things like that, which I can kind of get into. I don't know if y'all did the last.
We talked a
Yeah.
little bit about limit setting.
Yeah.
But do you set limits in play therapy?
Yeah, we do. If the child is being unsafe or
Are you
there's
gonna
just a
smack
limit.
them on the hand?
No, don't smack the child on the head. So
With the sword?
They might do that to you though.
So how do you
That's
set
when you
the
set a
limit
limit.
in a play therapy
So
session?
there's an acronym called ACT, right? A is acknowledge the emotion. So if a person or a child is trying to hit me with a sword and they're laughing and they're having the time of their life, you're so excited. It's so fun for you to hit me with that sword, right? And then you communicate the limit, but I'm not for hitting with that sword. And then you give them alternatives. So that's targeting the alternatives, which is you can choose to hit that doll or the sand or the punching bag. But again, I'm not for hitting, right?
So even in a play session,
yeah.
the kid may do something that would be inappropriate
Oh,
in terms of even
not a
your
free-for-all.
physical
It's not a free-for-all.
safety.
Not a
Yes,
free-for-all.
yes. I get that sand thrown at my face a lot,
Yeah.
It's just like
And then
Dark
you say,
guns being shot
Yeah.
at you,
dark
right?
guns. Yeah. And, it's constantly, you're kind of setting limits in a very almost like accepting, empathetic way, right? There's no rejection. There's no shame. There's no embarrassment. There's no remember what you did last session? Like every time is a fresh start when they come in.
I had this
Yeah.
kid one time who was, later he was diagnosed as being on the spectrum. And so we work with a lot of different
Yes.
issues that kids may have, including on the spectrum, and there's some wonderful stuff in play with kids on the spectrum too that is just fascinating work that you can do. But he was probably on the spectrum. He was on the spectrum. He was later
Yeah.
diagnosed with that. He was only 3 or 4 at the time. And then he also later was diagnosed with bipolar disorder too. So he had some interesting behaviors, I'll
Sure,
put, and
sure.
he walked into my playroom and slugged me right in the
Sorry.
face, and my glasses went flying, mangled back, and I'm bleeding because of the glasses.
Oh,
and I
boy.
did say, I'm not for hitting.
That's impressive, right? Somebody might be like, go into defense mode.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
the idea is to stay kind of grounded, right? That congruence, stay grounded in the principles, and use the language that a child can really understand and feel comforted with.
So you do use language then?
Oh my gosh, that's like the way that we communicate with the kiddos is through that. Yeah.
So you communicate with language back to them
Yes.
in terms of what they may be doing?
Yeah, how they're playing, what they're playing with. We use emotional language, kind of, all the toys are there for a reason. And so they help the child, express their real life experiences, used to symbolize things, and we're there being the tracking person to
Yeah,
track all
yeah.
of that for them.
Well, and I
Yeah.
guess also to be thinking in terms of like one of the things about language is you're all if you're using a lot of language that's connecting with what they're doing, it looks like that may be the reason why language is
It's
stimulated
huge. It's
and
huge.
processed. Let me ask you, are there certain toys that you do have in a play therapy room, or can it be just anything?
Yeah.
Are there certain things that you would not want to have in there? What are the reasons for maybe the toys and what you're trying to have accessible to the child?
Yeah. So the idea is that, there are specific toys. They help a child kind of process their emotions. So they should be able to symbolize, that aggressive behaviors, angry behaviors, just family relational type stuff. And they kind of help us understand children and themes, right? And it's not a free for all. We don't just add any toy that we see. And they're categorized with, like I said, nurturing, exploring, activities, and just to stimulate that emotional kind of growth. Yeah.
I wanted to go back some of the strategies. I
Yeah.
know that we've talked about this at length. The idea of not only some of the tracking and being available and showing that you're there. I think one of the things that I think is so powerful in play therapy is being able to reflect those feelings that you're seeing
Yeah.
and building the child's emotional
Yes.
vocabulary.
Yeah.
I
huge.
love being able to see a little one that language hasn't quite developed, and maybe they're struggling with putting a toy together and they're getting real frustrated, and then being able to reflect that, right?
Yeah.
This is frustrating that you can't get that
Yeah.
to work the way you want.
Yes.
And I think I hear that from parents a lot is I know that you play, but I've also noticed that my child is able to use feeling words.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could share a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. We use a ton of feeling words, good ones, the not so fun ones. And as they're playing, we help them understand their emotions and what it might be, right? It's a point of connecting with the child, trying to get them from the lower part of the brain to the upper part of the brain and use more reasoning and regulate in a better way. So kind of that example, I have kiddos, like we have Play-Doh in the playroom, right? And so it's hard to open the Play-Doh cap sometimes, and kiddos have a hard time, and you see a kiddo struggling, like you said, and you're like, oh, that's really hard, and then you see kiddos like trying to look at it, trying to figure it out. And in that moment, I think that's so important to voice that. You're figuring it out, you're trying, even though I know it's just a little Play-Doh thing, but they're trying to figure out how to open it, right? And if you jump in and just do it for them, that is doing for a child what they can do for themselves. And that's not what we do, right? We try to encourage and build and
Which that is an
increase
important parenting principle. Don't do
It
for a
is
child
huge.
what you can do for themselves. I've just been with my
Yeah.
6-month-old granddaughter. And
Not a lot she can do for
they
herself.
come on the planet needing everything done for them. Everything. And so parents get used to that.
Yeah.
Doing everything. And I mean everything.
Yeah.
But it's that letting go little by little, turning responsibility over to the child.
Yes.
That's important. Don't do for a child what they can do for themselves.
Yes, it's huge.
I feel like that's the piece, right, that builds that self-esteem, builds that ability to cope, builds that resilience, where they see that I can do it. I can stick with it. I can,
And you can, some kiddos will be like, no, I really can't, but you know that they can. And you're like, you kind of have to stand your ground and say, I know you're having trouble, but I really think you can do it.
Right.
And you would never do it for them fully, but if anything, you would do it together.
Right.
Let's see if we can do it together. What can you do, and then what can I do?
Yeah,
right?
I love that.
So that's super important.
Well, I know in, adult talk therapy, we don't necessarily go session to session and focus just on the content. We start noticing, kind of some underlying things. We start kind of putting the puzzle together, and it may be less about what was shared in that particular session. We might have to look, at the bigger picture. In play therapy, are there similar kinds of things, themes maybe that you look for?
Yeah, absolutely. There's Definitely a ton of themes. I think some of the big ones I really want to talk about. The first one is kind of like power, control, and kind of needing that. You
Yeah,
know,
that's a big one.
children,
It's a big one.
children are told what to do all the time, and that's how it's supposed to be for them. But it can be a very powerless feeling, and so power and control can look in session like hero versus villain, right? The oppressor versus the oppressed, and I'm the boss and you're going to sit over there and I'm going to take you to, just very trying to get that authority and trying to make decisions. That's a really big thing we see almost all the time. It's a big one. And some nurturing type themes and family relationship type themes are huge. A parent's attachment and relationship with their parents comes out in play. They'll play out their parental roles, and you kind of get an idea of their inner world, right? A child will come in and play out their weekend or something, right? Where they had a dinner party, and the dinner party is, okay, like we have to go and get on the table and make sure the table is set, and Miss Trisha, you're gonna go sit over there, and I'm gonna sit, like it's a very intense play session, right? And that also leads me to control and like safety themes, right? Which that can be seen like a child will come in and start cleaning or organizing or trying to kind of build things and make sure everything is tidy. They might play out dangerous situations or disasters or, hurricanes, tornadoes, sandstorms are a big one, and so a lot of safety themes, needing safety, rescuing people, rescuing themselves. And that can be seen, them processing like trauma, it's huge. Mastery themes are one too, where they try to show you their competence, right? And try to show you that they can do it. They can put that ball over there, or they can scoop the sand and pick up the entire bucket. And they want you to know they can do it.
Or they're going to cheat and win the game.
Or cheat and win the game, yes,
Well,
which is typical.
It sounds like even traumatic events that have taken place, because a lot of things we're hearing in today's world is about the topic of trauma. And we're hearing a lot about trauma. And that seems to be also in the psychological world, a lot about trauma. But yes, this is about helping kids with trauma as well.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed with younger kids is when they're really doing, and they've had neglect in their history, they tend to play a lot with that nurturing kind of thing, because that was what was missing.
Yes, it's oftentimes, what's missing is what we see in the play. What's missing in their inner world, their connections with their family or their friends or just their social world.
Some unmet needs.
Well,
Thank you.
that
Yes.
brings us to the subject. Well, let me just say, I think that, with regard to play therapy, it sounds to me from a lot of what you're saying that it is also about building self-esteem, that it's about helping the child to grow and feeling empowered instead of disempowered.
Yes.
Because you were talking about the empowerment themes.
Yeah.
And so self-esteem building sounds like that's another one that you're working on, is to build that kid up on the inside.
Absolutely. And that, we provide a lot of encouragement in our sessions. I mean, that's a huge kind of tenet of in play therapy, providing encouragement for the child versus praise. And praise is great, right? Children need to hear, you did a great job, and wow, look at that test result. It's an A, great job, right? But that just focuses on the result. And we want to build children to focus rather on the process, right?
Yeah.
You work so hard, you failed is probably not the right word, but it took you a while to kind of get there, but you did it anyway. You stuck to it, right? You're pointing out that perseverance that they have, and that's what you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And that's what they see that you're focusing on, so they're going to want to do that more and more. It's like a positive reinforcement thing, right? If you're just reinforcing the result and the good result, that child's going to be driven just by results, and we don't want that.
So we've touched on some of the issues that are maybe appropriate for kids coming into play therapy, but are there what types of issues would be appropriate for play therapy?
Yeah, I think, anger issues, conduct problems, behavioral issues, anxiety, depression, any family issues, so like children going through a divorce or death of a family member, so grief, if they've had any recent medical kind of issues and trying to process that. ADHD can be helped, as you said earlier, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, domestic violence, abuse, just all kinds of things.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, And we deal with all of that
Yeah,
at our
we do.
center.
We do.
All of that.
You know, all of it is coming through. And we're
Yes.
trying to help people in all of those different facets.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I mean, really, it sounds like, really any issue.
Yeah.
There isn't.
We could at least give it a shot, you know?
Right.
It's
right.
it's a good shot, I think.
Right. I have parents ask when we're starting play therapy, if they will be a part of the session. Will they be in the room?
That's right.
Will they be, playing with their child?
Yeah.
Maybe you could share a little bit
Sure.
about how that looks.
So, it really depends on kind of the kiddo. And so it's like a yes and a no. So let me kind of elaborate. Typically, it's just the therapist and the child in the playroom. Sometimes if, we'll have 10 sessions and we'll see that there's a lot of need maybe for mom to come into the session and just kind of be there and observe or try to pick up on the skills that the therapist has and try to build that relationship, right? Try to form that healthier attachment in the event that their attachment has been compromised, right, with their caregiver or parent. So parents are essential in that we do have parent meetings and we have them regularly. They're an important piece, very important piece, because without them we can't really
They know their child the best.
They know their child the best, and we need them. We need their participation, and we make sure that those parent meetings get done. And we provide suggestions and give them tools, and kind of it's a whole family thing, right? When we tell parents, sometimes they're like, "How do I tell my parent or my child about play therapy? What do I say?" And it's like, well, it's kind of one of those things where you can say your child's going to get a time to play and talk about feelings, but also mommy and daddy are going to learn too. It's a learning opportunity for the entire family.
It's a big part of, I think, what we do.
Huge.
Yeah, it's not one or the other. I think it's working with the child and also working with the parents.
Yeah.
Supporting the family.
The entire family, not just the kiddo. But the whole family.
So, and then in terms of, I know I do something called filial therapy.
Yeah.
Which is another way to involve the parents, and I'm currently working with someone that I'm doing that with right now.
Awesome.
Can you tell us a little bit about what filial therapy is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's when the therapist can train and kind of supervise parents on child-centered play therapy and help them to do those sessions at home, and away from the play therapy with the actual therapist, right? It helps to build, like I said, that attachment, helps to repair relationships between parents and child. So it's not like when the damage is done and you're like, oh, well, now we can't recover. No, there's always recovery. We can always go back, and repair those relationships and those attachments. So basically, we're teaching parents how to do child-centered play therapy in filial.
Well, and one other thing I wanted to ask you too, is play therapy something that a child begins and will be in for the rest of their life?
No. Research suggests about 20 sessions is a good kind of indicator of the, problems being solved. And so, like I said, each child is different, right? And they might need less than that, or they might need more. It varies. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
Going back to the filial therapy
Yeah.
during quarantine.
I was just thinking that too.
I think we were all thinking it
Yeah.
during quarantine when we were not able to
oh my
see our
goodness.
kids in the clinic.
Yeah.
We did a lot of training with parents on how to do, some of the play therapy to work through the filial therapy model. And, I think it was so helpful. I really do. I mean, there were a lot of things that, we wish that we could have done in the center, but to give parents that opportunity to have that intentional time and to learn how to connect with their child and put their phone away and do some of that, carving out of that intentional time to play. I think
Such
that was
a good point.
I think it was so powerful. And I love, even still, teaching parents to do that, because I think, we're so busy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all are just busy in our lives, and our kids are busy, and to find time to carve out, right, and to have, especially with our younger ones, an opportunity to play and use some of the strategies, I think it can be very powerful for parents.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, so talking about little ones, what about our teens and tweens? So, I have many of the teens and tweens that I work with, and we have at our center incredible activity rooms. We have pool table, we have ping pong, we have foosball, basketball, so many great, different opportunities. Is that play therapy? Is that?
So I would say that's more like activity therapy.
Okay.
It's more directive, right? You're using those activities, arts, crafts, sports, games, puzzles, to connect with the child. I mean, I have some teens too, and we'll be playing ping pong and we'll be talking, right? And that's kind of how they come out of their shell, is having something. I had a kiddo last week came in, and she's a teen, and she's like sitting on my couch, but she's like, I need something to fidget with. Can you please give me something? Right? So then I kind of throw her something, and doing that helps her. She's talking and she's looking down and fidgeting, right? And so it's just important to, activity therapy is great too.
It is so
awesome.
much fun working with kids, I think.
Yes, it
because
is.
I've had kids upside down on the couch because that's what they needed to do.
That's what they got to do,
And then they were talking and
Bouncing on the trampoline,
Yeah.
bouncing, and talking.
yes. And
Yep.
I had one kid I was playing not basketball, ping pong with, and she every time she would get into some pretty deep stuff that she was talking about.
Yeah.
Her parents were divorced, and she was talking about how difficult it is and challenging. I tried to stop so that I could focus attention on her, and she'd say, "What are you doing? Keep playing." And as long as I was
sometimes it's-
playing,
She
she
would
was
share.
talking.
Yeah.
Yes. Obviously, same thing with playing pool with teenagers. Same thing. They can talk when they're doing something where it doesn't feel like the spotlight is on top of them. I'm gonna say we are so privileged here today
Yes.
with having Trisha here today, Trisha McCon. As you can tell, she's just amazing and amazing with children
Thank
and
you.
fabulous and knows what she's doing.
Absolutely.
So, and if you want to find out more about her, you can go to our website, www.drbeckloff.com. That's DRBECKLOFF.com. Again, thank you. Thank you for
course.
our wonderful licensed psychologist, co-host, Dr. Elizabeth Zach, who, as you can tell, helps us with lots of contributions and helps us to keep things together, since she is also the director of counseling services at our office as well.
Yes.
And thank you again.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
It was
yes.
good. Yeah.
And that's it.